All right, everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 3 recap. Another crazy week. Let's see, some injuries, no real big ones. Uh, some poor performances, some big performances, some missed opportunities around the league for a lot of guys here. Um, a lot of not very close matchups this week. I think the closest was Kevin and Detling. They're coming down to Monday night, but we had 30 point. I'm just taking a quick look here. We got a 30-point difference, 40 points, 11, 8, uh, 87, something like that, and 13, 14, 15. So some kind of close ones, but also some big blowouts this week. Where else should we start with? Every week, I know it's always trying to come home from work and I'm gonna record the video and try to decide what T-shirt I should wear. And you know what? I've got this nice Victor Cruz T-shirt where it's got the New York Giants logo on the front, and as you can see, it's got his name and number on the back. Pretty nice. So I figured, I don't know if maybe I'll start wearing this every week, but I had a couple of complaints about last week's recap, so I just pulled this out of the fridge from an old Rizzo Christmas party. A Riesling? Almost. But keep this around just in case. Feel a lot better now. Whew. Nice and refreshing. Just want to feel like I'm one of the guys with your fancy craft beers. I'm sorry I don't have a craft beer. This is all I could find offhand. This has literally been sitting in my fridge for 2 years. So, well, it's gone now. Let's see. Anyway. Whew. Alright, now that that's finished, we can actually get down to business. Anyway, as we always do, we begin with the defending champions matchup, and that is from Gags to Riches, going up against FC Bohoric. But unfortunately, we got from Gags to Riches more like from Gags to Stitches, maybe? This year, first to worst we've got so far here. I can't help but feel I'm sorry for you, Gags. Just the way it's going so far this year. But you're down, but you're definitely not out. If you get a win this week, you could maybe bounce back, get back in it. You're not the only 0-3. You're sharing the basement with Jay now, I think. But I can tell you from personal experience that you get a win this week, you get to 1-3. You're down, but you're definitely not out. It's going to be a struggle all season, but there's always that chance to turn it around. Everybody's team is good enough, I think, to compete every week, and you just never know what's going to happen. So anyway, the final score here was 193.8 for FC Bohoric to 105.2 for Gags to Riches. Both guys had a player on Monday night, but I think Gags was still under 100. and Justin was around, well, let me take a look at my sheet here, 160, 158 or so. But as you probably noticed, Larry Fitzgerald had a crazy game. Quarterbacks in this matchup, we had Drew Brees versus Matt Ryan. Good matchup there. Another kind of disappointing score for Matt Ryan, which cost Justin last week. Fortunately for him, didn't cost him this week. Brees with 45 and Ryan with 37.5. So that's kind of another kind of disappointing score for Matt Ryan. So last week he had 36.5, and this week 37.5 after a 45-point performance in week 1. So if you're Justin, you're kind of hoping for maybe some uptick in quarterback production there as the season goes along. Fortunately, it's not really costing you a lot of wins yet. So, but I mean, it might have. I don't know what the score was last week. Well, let me take a look at my sheets here. I got all the stuff everywhere. You got a 30-point loss last week. So you would have needed a 70-point performance from Matt Ryan. So it wasn't just in his hands last week, but you're definitely going to be looking for, if you do, I mean, you scored 193 points. If you're going to get higher production from your quarterback and the kind of production you're getting from the rest of your team, you're going to be basically unstoppable. So I'm going to have to change my mind. I'm rooting for Matt Ryan to keep scoring 35, 36 points every single week. Wide receivers, Justin had A.J. Green, Keenan Allen, and Pierre Garcon. 2 gags, Devontae Adams, Rashard Matthews, and Dez Bryant. Let's see. A.J. Green, 27. Keenan Allen, 11. Garcon, 21. So that is, 33 and 27 is 60. A little over 60 from those 3. Man. Devontae Adams, 9. Rashard Matthews, 20.5. And Dez Bryant, 9. So you got about 39 points from your 3 receivers. Running backs, Justin, as we know, has Kareem Hunt and Mike Gillislee. Hunt had another long touchdown. I think he's the first. Is he the first player to have touchdowns of over 50 yards or something like that in his first 3 games now? He had a 69-yard touchdown run. So that pushed him all the way up to 172 yards. He had on that touchdown. I think he had some receiving stats too. Gillislee, he only had 30 yards, so that brought you down a bit, but you still got at least a good 25 points from your running backs. Marshawn Lynch and Jeremy Hill. Lynch only 18 yards and Hill only 23 yards. So just about 5 points from your 2 running backs there. Let's see. Then tight ends, we had Kelsey versus Austin Hooper. And this was a battle in futility here as Travis Kelce goes for 1.1 and Austin Hooper goes for 1.9. Flex spot, Justin, again, as I mentioned, he had Larry Fitzgerald. He's going with the 4 wide receivers every week. And Fitzgerald blew up last night. He had 34 points, while Sproles was in the flex for gags. He had 11 yards, and as I'm sure you probably know by now, I see he's listed on the IR here. He is, I think, done for the year. Yeah, he's definitely done for the year, because on the same play, Darren Sproles breaks his arm and tears his ACL. I think it was somebody saying that, I don't know if it was on the Line app or if I read somewhere, I can't remember, but something about you could hear Darren Sproles, like you could hear him screaming in pain somewhere, like on TV. I shouldn't laugh at that, but hey, he's clearly a tougher man than most of us, myself included. So I definitely would not enjoy those things happening to me. But unfortunately for you, He only said he only got you those 1.1 and kickers. Jeez, Justin. Even Justin's kicker is crushing it this year so far. As Prater had two, I see he had two 50-plus yard field goals, a 40-yarder and a 30-yarder. Yahoo says 19, always a little bit more than that with the fractions. And Gags, his kicker, only got you one. So just between the flex and the kickers, Justin got 52 to your 2. So, that's, you're going to lose every week with those kind of numbers, Gags. And finally, defenses, Miami for Justin, New England for Gags. Both say 11 on Yahoo. Miami might have been right around that, maybe actually a little bit less because they lost. New England, right around there, maybe a little bit more because even though they did win the game, they gave up a ton of points, a ton of yardage to Houston there. So, but yeah, with this loss, the defending champion, Gags to Riches, he drops to 12th place. He is now 0-3, while FC Wahoric gets the win. He moves to 2-1, and he is in 3rd place. Next matchup, we had Springfield Isotopes, Skelehor Isotopes, I should say, going up against Disco. And the Isotopes get their first win of the year, 189.2 to 156.9. Let's see, take a look here. Quarterbacks, we had Matthew Stafford versus Derek Carr. Stafford, 44 points. Carr in a just an absolutely miserable performance to watch. That game on Sunday night there wasn't much of a game. Carr struggled to get anything going. All his completions were dink and dunk little passes to the running backs in garbage time, really. He was fortunately able to scrape up 23.5 points. Still a miserable performance there. Fortunately for the Isotopes, one of the receivers that Disco was looking for, maybe a big game, maybe sneak a win here, for him was Amari Cooper, one of his receivers, but Cooper only had 1 for 6 yards. Michael Thomas, looks like 7 for 87 and a touchdown, and Jarvis Landry, 6 for 50 there. So looks like you got, from your 3 receivers, Cooper, Thomas, and Landry, about 33 points, while the Isotopes had Alshon Jeffrey, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs. Jeffrey, 9.5, Tyreek Hill, about 18.5. I think he had some rushing stats there, had to cut off. And Stephon Diggs actually went for 40.5, thanks to 2 touchdowns, 170 yards receiving. So about 70, almost 70 points from the 3 receivers there. Running backs, as we mentioned before, I think on the lineup, a great Thursday night matchup last week. Gurley versus Hyde, the running back matchup there. Fortunately for the Isotopes, it went a little bit in favor of Gurley, as he had 3 total touchdowns and got over 100 yards rushing, while Hyde still pretty good himself. He had 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. The other running backs were Jonathan Stewart and Paul Perkins. Stewart had 57 yards, and Perkins had 22. Tight ends, we had Gronk versus, I'm not even sure how you would pronounce that, Njoku from the Cleveland Browns. He only caught 2 passes for 12 yards, but one of them was a touchdown. So he got a little bit over 9 points there from him. But Gronk had 8 for 90 and a touchdown. So about 23 points from him. In the flex, we had Odell Beckham Jr. versus Tariq Cohen. Beckham Jr., 2 touchdowns, 9 catches, 29 points. While Cohen, not too bad. 14.5 points from him. Although, I was just telling Justin earlier how I was going back and forth on Sunday between the Steelers game and the Giants-Eagles game, because had people in both of those games trying to keep track on what's going on in each one here. And the Steelers went to overtime, flipped over to the Eagles game there, and all of a sudden I look at my phone, and suddenly Terry Cohen has like 28 points. I'm like, holy shit, what just happened? What did I miss? His score pretty much doubled there. He did run. I guess he ran for a 70-some yard touchdown, but they said that he just by an inch stepped out of bounds somewhere, so that it was only a 30-some yard rush there. But so he would have had 28 points there, but cut that down in half, back to 14 there, without the long touchdown. But then kickers, we had McManus versus Gostkowski, 9-4 in favor of McManus there. Gostkowski only made a couple PATs. And then defenses, the Isotopes had Atlanta versus Pittsburgh for Disco. Pittsburgh, I believe, even though they lost the game, they didn't give up a whole lot of yardage. I think there was only about 80 yards passing, I think, in the game total for the Bears, but they ended up losing the game, and Yahoo says 11. I think it actually was about 16 or 17, something like that. So you're hoping for a little bit more there. As for the Isotopes, they had Atlanta Falcons defense, and they gave up a ton of points, ton of yards all over the place, but they managed to squeak out a win there, so that's always a good +3. No turnovers or anything there. Yahoo says 8. I think it was actually I think it was 11, so only a couple extra points there. For the defense, fortunately, those couple big performances from Diggs and Gurley were enough, and Gronk were enough to get the Isotopes over out of the winless column here and getting a win over Disco. So, let's see. Anything else to add about this matchup? I don't think so. Disco with a loss, he's still in pretty good shape. He's 2-1. He's in 5th place. While the Isotopes, they move up to 1-2, and they are now in 7th place. And the current team taking over first place here in week 3. I'm sure Brian will be excited that I said that. The first play, I'm just going to say this just so Brian can talk about it in the podcast tomorrow. The now first place Hillbillies on PCP. So you can enjoy those words being spoken at least once this year. As the Hillbillies on PCP top everybody Ertz by a score of 171.45 to 160.7. Quarterback matchups heavily in favor of everybody Ertz actually here. Jared Goff 48.5 to Phillip Rivers just under 23. I really thought I was thinking that once picking up Goff was a pretty good move for everybody Ertz here. Wasn't sure last week if he was going to pick up Goff or Simeon and play them, but obviously Goff was a better matchup this week for you. Looks like he might be a pretty productive quarterback for the rest of the season, maybe. He might. And when you picked him up and played him, and he scored 48.5 points on Thursday night there, and I don't think Brian had anybody on Thursday, but I really genuinely thought this might have been the move that saves your season, could be the key to your season here. Get some wins, but it just wasn't quite enough from the rest of your team. Even if Golden Tate had scored that touchdown there at the end, you would have just I don't think you would have caught up. You would have been a little bit closer. But anyway, Hillbillies receivers: Antonio Brown, Demaryius Thomas, and Devontae Parker. Brown 27 points. Demaryius 15.5, and Parker 21.5, which I think was mostly some garbage time points there at the end of the game for Devontae Parker. I think whenever I was listening to something, they said that his touchdown was like the very last play of the game. So anyway, but still, you got what, 36 and 27 is 63. So a little over about 63 points from your three receivers. Sorry if my math is wrong there. I just chugged a whole bottle of wine, so get off my case. But anyway, for everybody Ertz, receivers were Julio Jones, Golden Tate, and Deshaun Jackson. Julio, 16, Golden Tate, 18.5, and same thing for Deshaun Jackson, about 18.5. So it looks like you got 36 and 16, 52, 53-ish from your three receivers. Running backs, Brian actually started Duke Johnson and not in the flex. And fortunately for you, he had a 20-yard touchdown run, which was pretty much all that counted out of his stats there for you. And you had Jordan Howard, who somehow looked like, in the game, he looked like his shoulder was in so much pain. I don't understand how he was carrying it. He was carrying the ball in his left hand, I think, the whole time. Because he was clearly favoring his right shoulder and like trying not to get hit there and land on it and things like that. But yet somehow he just ran right through them. Still, he had over 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the end of the game and ending the game in overtime there with a couple big runs, including the last touchdown run in overtime that sealed the win. Even though he was one of the defenders was clearly being held right in front of him and they didn't call it. But anyway, so you got, I'm not even sure what Duke Johnson's score here was exactly because it's all showing his past stats, but you got about, I'm going to say 36, no, close to, because he got a touchdown. So you got about 40, I'm going to guess, from your two running backs. While Ertz had Fournette and Gore. Both of them scored touchdowns. Both of them had just under 60 yards, so about 12 from each of them. Tight ends, Delanie Walker versus Coby Fleener. 7 for Walker, 3 for Fleener. Flex plays, Devonta Freeman versus McCaffrey. Freeman, over 100 yards and a touchdown. So, the Devonta Freeman effect is, maybe you're being cursed this year by maybe the Devonta Freeman effect this year is that if he scores, you don't win. So maybe you should start rooting for Devonta Freeman to not score and maybe send those touchdowns over to Julio Jones. A lot of reliance on the Atlanta Falcons here. They're two biggest players on offense there. So you will ride or die this year as the Atlanta Falcons go, most likely. So, and it's not working out for you quite so well so far this year. And Hillbillies had McCaffrey, who, in a game that's, I think most people thought the score would be the other way around, or at least the winner would be the other way around here, as New Orleans actually was a 34-13 winner over Carolina. So Carolina was playing catch-up almost the entire game, which results in McCaffrey having 9 catches for over 100 yards receiving and only 16 rushing yards. So he got you about 20.5, and again, 19 of those came from receiving stats there. So fortunately, I mean, there's really, as you know, there's no other place to play him other than the flex this year. Kickers, Hillbillies had Lutz versus Santos for everybody. Ertz, who I see is now on the IR. Santos, that is. Lutz had 11 and Santos 6. And then we had probably the biggest difference here, the Denver Broncos defense versus Tampa Bay defense. Denver, it says here 7 on Yahoo. It's probably a little bit more than that, even though they lost the game. They did okay in terms of yardage. Buffalo's never a huge team in terms of accumulating crazy yardage stats. But Tampa Bay defense, they got throttled by the Minnesota Vikings and Case Keenum. They gave up a ton of points, a ton of yards. They lost the game. Yahoo says 0. I don't know if I can't remember if it was exactly 0 or maybe you got a couple points, but it was really a no-win situation here for Everybody Ertz this week because taking a look at his bench, his other defense was the Seattle Seahawks, and they are also showing 0 on Yahoo. They gave up a ton of points and a ton of yards, and I don't know if they really had any turnovers or anything. So both of your defenses just got rocked this week, and that really is what cost you sneaking out a win here, I think, against the said Brian probably shouldn't be 3-0 right now, but he just ran into a week where Everybody Ertz had no luck at all in terms of his defensive plays, and said an only 11-point matchup, the difference there, not too big, so really could have gone either way. Had to steal, I mean, if you think about it, Jordan Howard probably, I don't think he had over 100 yards rushing before that last overtime drive, because he had a couple, I think he had at least two or three long runs there. Cohen had one, and then I think Howard had like the last 2 or 3. Not sure if he was over 100 before that or not, but I mean, if you look into it, if he wasn't over 100 before the game went to overtime, said if they would have could have won, or somebody could have won the game before overtime, or of course if that's was it a kick return by the Chicago Bears, who the guy slowed down. He slowed down and stopped at the 1 yard line and tried to walk into the end zone, and the Steelers guy was a heads up and knocked the ball right out of his hand, and then they pushed it out of the end zone there. And I think the Bears ended up kicking a field goal instead of getting a touchdown. So if that had just happened as it should have and gotten a touchdown, then that game would probably never have gone to overtime, and Jordan Howard wouldn't have got his extra touchdown and yardage there, and maybe Everybody Ertz gets a win this week. But just was not to be. So what can I say? That's the way it goes. I think I said before, Everybody Ertz is basement buddies with Gags to Riches. They are both 0-3, although Everybody Ertz is on top of Gags. Jay is currently on top of Gags at 11th place. While again, to say this just to inflate his head a little bit more, boost the ego, maybe get it going. I'm sure it's all we're going to hear about in the podcast. It'll be maybe not all we'll hear about, but I'm sure it's going to be repeated several times that the Hillbillies on PCP are currently in first place. So, like I said, 3-0, first place. All right, what's next? Man, I've only done half the matchups. I see I'm already almost a half an hour on the thing here, so I'm going to try and speed it up here. Just get through this stuff. Because I know the longer it goes on, the less and less likely you guys are to stay interested in what's going on and keep on listening. Anyway, next matchup. The spring, or was this the matchup of the week? I believe. New Gods Mad Titans versus Shawshank Athletics. New Gods dropping out of first place with the loss here, as Shawshank stays undefeated, moves up to 3-0 with a score of 164.5 to New Gods Mad Titans 121.8. Quarterbacks, Tom Brady, another big game, 5 touchdowns, 67.5 points to New Gods, went with Jay Cutler. Looks like he got you 39 over your starting quarterback, who was Marcus Mariota, normally, who actually would have gotten you a couple more points than Jay Cutler did. About 42 there. Let's see. Didn't make a difference, though, in the 40-point difference. Wide receivers for Shawshank, he had Kelvin Benjamin, DeAndre Hopkins, and Allen Hurns. Benjamin got hurt in this game pretty early and went out after only 2.5 points. Hopkins, 14.5, and Hurns, 11. so about 28 points from your three receivers. New Gods had Terrell Pryor, Michael Crabtree, and Emmanuel Sanders. Again, Crabtree suffering from that miserable performance by the Raiders. They're just like Amari Cooper. He only had one catch for 7 yards. I believe he went out too with a chest injury. I'm not sure if he came back in the game there. And then Terrell Pryor, only 4 points from him. Still kind of waiting for a breakout from him that has yet to happen. Maybe just trying to get in sync with Kirk Cousins there. I'm sure it's only a matter of time till they get on the same page and things start clicking there. And he starts putting up some better numbers. And Emmanuel Sanders, 14.5 points. So you only got about 18 or 19 from your three receivers. Running backs for Shawshank, he has Jay Ajayi and Perrine from the Redskins. Looks like Ajayi, only 16 yards, and Perrine, only 49 yards and a lost fumble. So that takes you down to 2.9. So you got about 5 points from your running backs. Well, New Gods, he had Melvin Gordon, who also got hurt in that game, but not before he rushed for 80 yards and a touchdown. And C.J. Anderson, only 36 rushing yards. So you got about 17 from your two running backs. Tight ends, really really a quiet week here from most of these tight ends here. As Jason Witten for New Gods, only one catch for 3 yards, while Ben Watson, he didn't do too much, except he did catch a touchdown at the end of that game. A little over 10 from him. Flex plays, we have Le'Veon Bell versus Derrick Henry. Fortunately for Josh, he went with Henry over DeMarco Murray, who had a 75-yard touchdown run on your bench. Fortunately, it didn't cost you there. He only had 7.5, and Le'Veon Bell had 21, almost 22. Kickers, Crosby and Boswell, 7-4 respectively. And then defenses, Shawshank had Jacksonville, who clobbered the Baltimore Ravens. Almost had a shutout there, except that it went to your tight end, who broke the shutout with his touchdown. You probably would have preferred the shutout there. It would have been a little bit more points, I think. It might have been about the same. You know what? It probably evened out. You actually might have gained up 1 point, because there's a 6-point difference between a shutout and 7 points, and the touchdown and the catch are 7. So just a little bit in favor of you there, actually getting that. So Jacksonville, Yahoo says 17. I think it was more than that. It's probably up into the 30s, I want to say. But then New Gods, he had Green Bay's defense. They did win the game, but they gave up a lot of yards, a lot of points there. Looks like they had 1 turnover, a couple sacks. Yahoo says 12, but I think it was a little bit more than that, but not enough to keep up with Jacksonville. Again, they had another. They must be going every other week here, because they had a big week 1, nothing in week 2, and now another big one here in week 3. So it wasn't enough for New Gods Mad Titans, but he's still in pretty good shape here. He is 2-1 and in 4th place, while Shawshank, like I said, remains undefeated, and he is in 2nd place. Next matchup came down to Monday night. Like I had said before, Space Antelope versus Dub C Hooligans, and Space Antelope is able to sneak it out. Final score, 140.15 to 132.6. So really just a 7.5 point difference there. And I think, let's see, Dub C needed, I want to say, I think it was 17.5 going into Monday night, and he had the Arizona Cardinals defense, while Space Antelope was finished. And I made a special note here to point out that so I didn't forget, because Yahoo says 0, Space Antelope, his defense was the Baltimore Ravens, and they actually scored -3, which might be a Tonto's Demise record somewhere in there. I'm not. That's about as low as it can get. Because you gave up too much. I think that is as low. That's got to be as low as it can get. -3, because with the loss, you lose the 3 points there, and they had no They had no stats. They had no sacks, no turnovers. Gave up too many points, too many first downs, too many rushing yards, too many passing yards. They got you absolutely nothing. And with that loss, the -3 that you get for the team losing, so you had actually ended up with your defense scoring -3. And I know a couple people keep every now and then asking about if we know for sure some Tonto's records here, but I think this is probably a record for futility in terms of. So, Detlin, you did set one record this week, or at least tied it. I really would be hard pressed to imagine any other weeks where I think even I said Jay's team, Yahoo says 0 for both of them, but I even think that they were able to scrape it back up to 0 or maybe a couple of points there. There was definitely no other -3s. But anyway, I digress. Said he needed 17.5 points from the Arizona Cardinals defense. I think he only got 10. Actually, it was looking pretty good. I really didn't watch this game. I think at halftime it was 7-7, if I remember correctly. Just checking on my phone right before the movie started, and so it was looking pretty good for Kevin that way. At least at that point, Dallas hadn't really too much yardage or first downs there, and said only 7-7. Looked like Arizona had a pretty good chance to cover that 17.5, but then things just fell apart there in the second half, and Dallas got a couple touchdowns, got you too many points, a lot of yards there, so said only 10 points, not enough. But anyway, quarterbacks, Space Antelope, Kirk Cousins versus Jameis Winston. Let's see. Cousins, 58.5 to Winston. Winston's 46.8. So I actually just want to take a quick look here to see remind myself what Drew Brees would have had if Kevin had still had Drew Brees and Dez Bryant, So 45 for Brees and 9.5 for Bryant. So you actually, from your trade for Winston and Evans, you gained, about 5 points from those two guys, from Winston and Evans, over Brees and Bryant this week, at least for this week. But anyway, so I got Cousins and Winston there. Receivers, we had Cooper Kupp, Danny Amendola, and Jordy Nelson for Space Antelope. Kupp 3.5, Amendola 7.5, Jordy Nelson 2 touchdowns, just over 23. So it looks like you got about 34, 35. From your 3 receivers, Dub C, Mike Evans, Marquise Lee, and Tyler Lockett. Evans 13.5, Lee 10.5, Lockett 5. So that looks like about 28, 29 from your 3 receivers. Running backs, Space Antelope, Terrence West, only 25 yards and he lost a fumble, so he got you about half a point. Dalvin Cook, looks like he had a touchdown and just under 100 yards. Crowell and Buck Allen, for Dub C, Buck Allen not in the flex, so you lost most of his stats there. He only had 15 rushing yards, so 1.5 points, and Crowell 44 yards, so only 4.5 points from him, 6 points from your 2 running backs. Tight ends, Space Antelope, Martellus Bennett, the Black Unicorn, 4.5 points, while Zach Ertz for Dub C, 17.5. So big difference there. Speaking of big differences, I think Detling was begging for it on the podcast last week, and he kind of got it this week. Doug Baldwin in his flex, 10 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown, 26.5 points from him. while Dub C theoretically had Theo Riddick in his flex play, and looks like he actually had no rushing stats. He got you 7.8 points, all from receiving. So you're overflowing with flex plays here. So it's really a crapshoot on which one to start each week. I think you were referring to this as the huberitis, where you got too many flex running backs to know what to do with, and you never know which one's the right one to start each week, and you seem like you always end up guessing wrong. But anyway, kickers. Dub C had Matt Bryant with 14 points to Blair Walsh with only 3, a couple PATs for him, the Seattle kicker there for Space Antelope. And again, said Baltimore defense -3 to Arizona 10. That just wasn't quite enough for Dub C. You would have liked to get a little bit more production there from your receivers, maybe Tyler Lockett. Maybe for you, the coming back of Willie Snead might make a big difference here next week. I think his 3-game suspension is done. But how's Kerwin Williams treating you so far? Let's see. He had 3 yards this week. So that was what, $65 well spent. You never know. It's a long season, so anything can happen. They're relying on old man Chris Johnson right now, so I guess you probably want me to keep dissing Kerwin Williams, because I will put some kind of curse on him, or at least on everybody else, by dissing him, and he will turn out to be fantasy gold here somewhere down the line. All right. Anyway, Space Antelope gets the win. He's now 2-1. He is in 6th place, and Dub C drops to 1-2 in 8th place. And let's see. Final matchup. Yes, this is the final one. We had Mighty Midgets versus Possum Magic, and Possum finally squeaks out a win. First one this year for him. Just past Mighty Midgets, 159.15 to 144.75. Turned out to be a great quarterback matchup here. The difference maker here for Possum Magic as Russell Wilson going for just under 70 points, while Aaron Rodgers for Mighty Midgets, another great game from him, just under 58. So I think Russell Wilson was the key to Possum's team here so far this year, as week 1 he had, taking a quick look here, week 1 he had 24, last week he had 40, but as you probably know, the Seahawks got down pretty big early in this game, so it was comeback mode pretty much the entire second half, I think, of that game. So hence the 70-point Russell Wilson outburst. Speaking of outbursts, Possum Magic had Sammy Watkins at wide receiver. He actually went over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had Jermaine Kearse and Rashard Higgins. Speaking of spending money freely, as we all know, Possum Magic threw out $100, half of his Fab account, for Rashard Higgins this past week, the Cleveland wide receiver, who he also has Kenny Britt, as you may remember, as his keeper, and Higgins goes for 3 points. So you paid more than $33 for every point this week that you got from Rashard Higgins, when you could have just stuck with Kenny Britt and actually got an extra 11 points there. So it seems like that's always the way it turns out, though, isn't it? In the fantasy world, everything down is up, left is right, 2 and 2 is 5. But anyway, so Watkins 28.5, Kearse 7, Higgins 3. So you got about 28, 38, a little over 38 from your 3 receivers. As for Mighty Midgets, Brandon Cooks, Kendall Wright, and Jamison Crowder. Cooks, finally a big performance from him. 2 touchdowns, 130 receiving yards, a little over 32. But unfortunately, Kendall Wright goes for 0, And Jamison Crowder, actually not a bad game, but he lost a fumble there. He got you 9.2, so just over 41 from your receivers. Running backs, Possum, LaShawn McCoy, and Lamar Miller. Seems like once again, LaShawn McCoy, most of his stats this week came from receiving. So you might want to think about moving him to the flex instead of Elliott. At least something to think about there. I'm not sure if it's the definite best call, but it's like McCoy only had 20 rushing yards, Miller only 56. As for Mighty Midgets, he had Abdullah and Carson. Abdullah 47 and Carson 34, but Carson did add a touchdown there. So looks like about 14, 15 points from your two running backs. These tight ends again, like I said before. Kyle Rudolph for Mighty Midgets, 1.4 to Hunter Henry for Possum Magic. 2 out of 3 weeks here, putting up a big 0 for Hunter Henry. Fortunately, it didn't cost you a victory here. Flex plays, we had Ezekiel Elliott versus Ty Montgomery. Elliott, 18.5 to Montgomery, an even 13. The difference, possibly a big difference here. I mean, it's a tough decision for Mighty Midgets here because if you look at Ty Montgomery, he had 8 catches. Somehow he had 8 catches, but only 15 receiving yards. Kind of strange stat there. But he had 35 rushing yards. So he needs to be a flex play as a running back. But now it looks like you also have Chris Thompson, who we should probably start talking about because I believe you picked him up for free from the free agent pool. So yeah, he didn't cost you any fab dollars, and looks like he's going to be. I mean, he just keeps putting up numbers every week here. So he actually had 150 receiving yards and a touchdown there this past week. So I think looking ahead, I think Mighty Midgets has already plugged him into the flex play. So I mean, that's a good play. Is he going to keep performing as well as he is right now? Who knows? But it's definitely going to be a tricky play there with Ty Montgomery, as a lot of his running back value has either come from receiving stats or getting touchdowns there. All right, anyway, kickers. For Midgets, he had Folk. Possum had Bailey. Bailey, only a couple PATs. He had 4. Folk, a couple PATs, and a 40-yard field goal. So a little bit in favor of Folk there. And then defenses, Possum went with Philadelphia instead of Minnesota. Fortunately, it worked out for him. They had a couple turnovers, won the game. Yahoo says 9, was a little bit more than that. Mighty Midgets here, another difference for him. He went with the Chargers defense. It looks like they had a couple sacks, but they gave up a lot of points and yards. Yahoo says 8, and it was right around there. Kind of surprising, Buffalo going against went with the Chargers instead of Buffalo's defense, who was at home, although it was against Denver, but they actually did pretty good. A couple turnovers and sacks. A 15-point difference here. I didn't actually tally the numbers, but it'd be interesting to look it up and see if this matchup could have gone the other way had Mighty Midgets played the Bills defense instead of the Chargers defense. I'll have to look that up later, but maybe he knows off the top of my head. But it doesn't matter, really, because hindsight is 20/20, and he went with the Chargers at home against Kansas City, and it didn't work out. But anyway, Possum Magic, like I said, he gets his first win. He is in 10th place, while Mighty Midgets, he loses it again. He is 1-2. Both these teams now 1-2. But Midgets are right on top of Possum in 9th place to Possum's 10th place. All right. I think that's about it for the week. The knockout is Jimmy, New Gods Mad Titans this week. I think it would have been Gags again, but unfortunately he was already eliminated in week 1. So I believe it was Gags in week 1, Possum Magic in week 2, and now New Gods Mad Titans here in week 3. Other than that, let's see. Not looking good here for the Dynasty pool that we have. The back-to-back champion, I guess you would call it officially, as Gags, looking to try and win that pot by winning a second title in a row. But looks like that pot's going to grow for at least another year or so, depending on who wins this year. Because it's not, it's looking bleak right now for Gags. But like I said, from my own experience, the Isotopes have been 1-3. I don't think we've ever been 0-4, but I know we've definitely been 0-3 and have come back from it, maybe to squeak into the playoffs or at least make a playoff push there down to the end of the season. But you've got the guys who can do it each week. You just need Lady Luck to be on your side, and she is a fickle female. So the fantasy gods have been bad to you so far, but like I said, they can. Who knows what the fantasy gods are doing, because they took away. I mean, just look at Mighty Midgets here. They took away David Johnson, but they also gave him Chris Thompson here. So who knows who Chris Thompson might be great here the rest of the season, as long as you have him there in the flex spot. But all right, I see I'm already over 50 minutes on the video, so I'm gonna cut it off here with no more ranting and raving about who knows what that's irrelevant. Hopefully, Brian appreciates. I didn't know what about the empty. I'm sorry about all the empty space in right in here and right up here. I'm sorry about that. I filled it in down here with Antonio Brown, and I also, as you can see, switched it over to Brian back there. He's watching. I don't know if you can tell quite for sure, but that's Brian peeking in back there. It was Detling last week. Who knows who it'll be next week. So, all right, that's it, everybody. Thanks for another good week. Looking forward to a lot of good matchups here in week 4. We still got 2 people undefeated. Looking for some other guys, looking for them to knock them off, while we have 2 teams looking for their first wins. I don't think any of those guys are playing each other. No, Hillbillies get the Isotopes, and Shawshank has Disco. Those should be some good matchups. And let's see, Gags has the Midgets, and Jay has FC Bahuric. So going to be 2 tough matchups there for those guys trying to get their first wins. And those undefeated guys are going to have their hands full with their matchups. So it should be a very interesting week 4. Looking forward to seeing what happens. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll see you here again next week. Good luck to everybody, but especially to me.